Hi, and welcome to this Friday's First Chapter Friday. This week, we're going to read the first chapter of Blackbirds in the Sky by Brandy Colbert. This is a nonfiction book, and it centers around the Tulsa race riots of 1921. So we're going to get right in. We are not going to read, or I am not going to read the entire chapter because it's pretty long, but we'll get a good start. All right, May 30th, 1921. Memorial Day 1921 began just like any other in Tulsa, Oklahoma, with many shops and stores closed for businesses as townspeople prepared for the big parade that would proceed down Main Street that morning. But one business that remained open on the busy street was a shoe shine parlor that employed a 19-year-old black man named Dick Rowland. Rowland had lived a rough life in his 2 short decades. His birthplace is unknown, but he was born Jimmy Jones and had 2 older sisters. By 1908, the 3 siblings were living as orphans on the streets of Veneta, Oklahoma, a town about 65 miles northeast of present-day Tulsa. Forced to seek shelter in the woods and under bridges, Jimmy and his sisters regularly begged for food to survive. This was how he met a young, divorced black woman named Damie Ford, who operated a small grocery store and lived alone. After feeding Jimmy a meal and listening to his proposition to help her around the business in exchange for food, Ford checked with Jimmy's sisters to make sure it was okay if she took in Jimmy, who appeared to be about 6 years old. They readily agreed, as that would be one less person they'd have to worry about in their hard luck family. Jimmy, who called his adopted mother Auntie Dame, quickly made himself useful, shelving products and cleaning the one-room grocery store and endearing himself to Ford's customers. However, though Ford was generous in spirit and made sure Jimmy was clothed, fed, and housed, the store didn't bring in a lot of money, and she struggled to support the 2 of them. About a year after Jimmy came to live with her, they moved to Tulsa, where he met Ford's family, the Rowlands, and where Ford hoped for more opportunities in the booming oil town. Ford moved to the Greenwood District, a thriving Black community in Tulsa, across the train tracks from where most of the white homes and businesses were located. At the time, Oklahoma was still heavily enforcing Jim Crow laws, mandates that segregated Black Americans from white Americans. This included housing, and because Black people were often banned from moving into white neighborhoods, they created their own district. Greenwood was founded in 1906 when a Black businessman named O.W. Gurley purchased 40 acres of land to establish an all-Black residential and business district. The landmark 1896 U.S. Supreme Court case Plessy versus Ferguson, which established the legality of Jim Crow legislation, stated spaces and accommodations segregated by race were legal as long as they were comparable. This is where the standard of separate but equal was born. The equal part rarely came to fruition with Black spaces and accommodations. Greenwood, however, was something of an anomaly in this respect. By 1914, the neighborhood boasted all kinds of Black professionals, from doctors and lawyers to business owners, educators, and newspaper publishers. And they kept their wealth within the community, continually supporting the businesses of what became known nationwide as the Black Wall Street. After moving to Greenwood, Damie Ford initially worked various jobs to make ends meet, eventually buying her own home on Archer Street. She rented out rooms to tenants to bring in money. Jimmy cleaned these rooms and also took on odd jobs to help out with expenses. Maybe it was the change in location, or maybe it was getting to know his adopted family, but Jimmy soon took on a new name. His first day in elementary school, he introduced himself as Dick Rowland, and at home, he asked that Aunt Dame use that name for him too. As a young kid, Rowland was a good student, but his interest in academics waned the older he got. By the time he was a teenager, he was known more for high school football. He was known more for high school football. He would drop out of school at times when the football season was finished, and his participation in Greenwood's nightlife scene. Rowland began ditching classes at Booker T. Washington High School to take a job shining shoes at a white-owned establishment in downtown Tulsa. He made a decent amount of money at the shoe shine parlor with generous tips from its white clientele, and so found no reason to get his high school diploma and work towards a higher paying, higher status job, as Auntie Dame encouraged him to do. On Memorial Day, 1921, Roland found himself in the Drexel building on Main Street, where he had to go to use the restroom, as there were no colored bathrooms in the shoeshine parlor. Back then, elevators required manual operation to run up and down the floors of buildings, and the elevator operator that day was a young white woman named Sarah Page. While little is known about Roland's life, even less seems to be known about Page. She had supposedly already been married and divorced by the time she was 17 in 1921 and had moved to Tulsa from Kansas City, Missouri to start over, renting a room in a boarding house on North Boston Avenue. It is rumored that Roland and Page had known each other prior to that Memorial Day, which would make sense as Roland had to visit the Drexel building to use the facilities during his work shifts and would likely run into Page sometimes. But it was also said by some, including Roland's Auntie Dame, that they had perhaps been romantically involved. And one of the biggest taboos in the early 20th century America was a relationship between a Black man and a white woman. Black men were routinely met with threats, violence, and murder for dating white women. In fact, the majority of lynchings that occurred at the time were of Black men arrested for unproven accusations of raping white women, some of which were cover-ups for situations in which white men were caught in consensual relationships with them. Few details have been confirmed about what happened in that elevator on May 30th, 1921. Roland and Page may be the only ones who actually knew, but what is known for sure is that Roland used the elevator that day, which Page was operating. The police later determined that Roland tripped while entering the elevator, reached out, and caught Page's arm for balance, causing her to scream out in surprise. A sales clerk from the Renberg's clothing store on the first floor of the building heard the scream, saw Roland hurrying out of the building, and called the police, assuming Page had been the victim of an attempted rape. There was no record of what Page told the police, but the damage was already done by the time they spoke to her and the Renberg's clerk. They had a description of an alleged assault. Dick Roland was a wanted man. All right, so that is the whole first chapter of Blackbirds in the Sky. If you would like to finish reading this one, it is also available in the library or through Sora ebook and audiobook. Have a great Friday.